Hey, hi again. I'm mobile hair farm Kyle Stevenson, and this is The Least We Know. Last episode, we covered the decade accounting of the construction of the Eglinton Crosstown LRT. If you missed that one, here's a brief summary of how that project is going. But while construction lumbers on, groups such as Black Urbanism TO have been sounding the alarm that the neighborhood of Little Jamaica along Eglinton, which has already seen many of its businesses close under the double whammy of years of construction and more recently COVID, is in danger of being dealt a third massive blow by gentrification once the subway is completed. This may surprise you, but I have exactly zero expertise or insight into how to balance a city's growth with the needs of the citizens who are already there. Which is why I felt quite lucky that one of Toronto's senior city planners, Sipo Maphangoh, agreed to sit down at the same time, but very far away from me, to discuss what's happening with Little Jamaica now and how the city looks at gentrification more broadly. One small note here, I re-recorded my questions to Sipo because during our interview, I was using an old, bad, untested Bluetooth headset because I am an idiot. Luckily, that is the premise of this entire show, so I do not feel ashamed. Rather, I feel like it gives the whole thing a real sheen of authenticity. Please forgive my crackly interjections as I attempt to demonstrate that I'm actively listening. Enjoy. As a city planner, how do you think about gentrification?
Well, it's tricky because in some ways, people might think we're in the business of gentrification. It's kind of what we do. We're a core part of our job. Our job description is managing change. The official plan, that's our key policy document, is about how to manage change, what areas are going to grow, what
Right.
areas are not going to grow. And so, gentrification many times is about taking something that wasn't great, or wasn't at its, I don't want to say best use, because that's kind of a more economical term, which
Right.
has a lot of weight to it. But a place that needed improvements and that eventually gets improved, and then more people want to live there. The issue that Toronto is facing is that, with a housing affordability crisis, whenever there's improvements made, the value of everything goes up drastically. And so the existing population can't, buy into projects in their neighborhood. And similarly, people at lower socioeconomic levels cannot buy in or get into the neighborhood. And so I think, housing affordability is the key solution to gentrification. When you're talking about Little Jamaica and Eglinton, there's just a whole bunch there that went wrong, in my opinion. I think it's always difficult when there's a separate agency controlling the street. So Metrolinx controls the street right now. So the city has very little flexibility. If you want changes, you need to go to the province to get those changes done. It's not something the city controls. So an example of that is, something that could bring a little more life into that area and help the businesses would be something like of course not now, but like a festival, right?
Right.
And a festival, if you've been down there, it's very possible right now, even with the construction, you could close down the street and still have construction. But that carries a level of liability and risk, and Metrolinx controls the street. And so, they're not willing to make that risk, to have that risk. And so those type of maybe easy solutions don't happen. Now, again, I'm not an engineer, so, I don't believe that the street's going to collapse into the tunnel just because there's, hundreds of people on the street. But it just shows an example of something that maybe the city would move forward with in that area, and can't. But there's no pulling wool over anyone's eyes. When you go there, you see the devastation. And it was not great pre-construction, for a number of reasons, and definitely during. To have those containers in front of your business is very unusual, not a common construction condition. It's very unique. I think it's very hard for your business to survive that, no matter what anyone, any
Sure.
government, other than remove them. There.
Is the city taking any proactive steps to deal with the gentrification that we can assume will come to Eglinton once the subway is complete? Or is gentrification something that the city reacts to only once it begins?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I would say that before the construction happened on Eglinton, there was a study called Eglinton Connects, and it did look at the entire Eglinton corridor where the LRT would be going. But you can imagine that a study like that is extremely broad. It's very high level. It did look at, segments. So there was some level of local analysis, definitely. And if you look at those documents, you'll see that. But I think that what people are interested in now is looking even deeper and solving those local challenges, design and street challenges and upcoming challenges with future development. And so I think that was the first foundational piece in terms of policy. Next, I've been working with Councillor Matlow, on other things, Councillor Cole, in just, looking at and listening to the advocates and the residents in this neighborhood, asking them what their priorities, what they want for their neighborhood. And so a group called Black Urbanism TO, Toronto, led by two gentlemen, and a larger group of, urbanists, planners. They just have, interesting backgrounds in city building, and they looked at the commercial aspect, the business aspect in Little Jamaica, talked to a lot of the business owners, and produced a report. And that report, which I can send to you so you can provide a link, really details the struggle, the issues, and what they want, what the community wants and the businesses want and need in order to survive into the future. And so it's very clear the type of economic policies that they're looking for. Some of that has to come from the province, the kind of, immediate action that's needed in terms of getting money to those businesses. And they've even, my understanding is they're raising money. I can't remember what the platform is, unfortunately, but they're raising money so to help business owners directly give that money to business owners that are struggling. And so I think that the city has, the mayor has a Black Business Roundtable for Eglinton. And so that has been, those business owners have had a direct line to the mayor's office. Planning, we've been listening, learning from the community for about a year now. And there is and we've been following that study from Black Urbanism TO, but also a study being done by CP Planning, which is owned and run by Cheryl Case, who is a young Black planner. And she secured funding from the federal government to do a kind of cultural / planning study in Little Jamaica. And so we've been talking, helping in any way that we can with her project. And, we're going to these engagement sessions. A lot of them happened pre-COVID, which was nice. We could actually meet a lot of the community members. And her report is not out yet, I don't believe. But we're just following what she's not from that community, but she has spent a lot of time in that community with her project. And Black Urbanism TO, a lot of their members are from that community or have strong connections to that community. So I think there's a shift a little bit in planning and in how to deal with that area, and really listening to the community and what they feel they need. And based on that, I worked with the counselor and other, city staff, along with Black Urbanism TO, confronting anti-Black racism unit, Indigenous Affairs Office, equity unit in at the city, to come up with a recommendation to do a cultural district in Little Jamaica, to develop and create, not unlike other cultural districts in the city. So an example that's not similar of a cultural district would be, along Bloor with the theaters and the museums, and that is a cultural district, that part of Bloor. But more similar to Little Jamaica would be more like the waterfront, an area that has historic value, and that, when you put the pieces of, landscaping, public art, just a general plan to draw people as a tourist destination,
right?
And local, local destination. And so that's the idea of creating a cultural district, is to, preserve what's there, celebrate the history, the very important history of contribution of Jamaican and Caribbean immigrants, and make it a place that is obvious in terms of a commemorative, make it very obvious and deliberate. One of the comments when I was attending the session, and sorry, I'm going on and on, but
no, please. I mean, this is insightful.
I'm very excited about this project, and it's been kind of a long time coming. One of the participants in one of the engagement sessions for, I can't remember, I think it was Black Urbanism TO, said that, somebody was visiting her, I think during Caravana, and they were like, this parade's great. Let's go to, the Caribbean neighborhood and continue the celebrations, like where all the parties are and the street festival. And that place doesn't exist.
Right.
In our email exchange, you talked about the need to make affordable housing a priority for the city, and you mentioned inclusionary zoning as one way to do that. What is inclusionary zoning, and how does it overlap with affordable housing?
So I think they do, they definitely overlap, and in solving housing, supply and affordability issues. But I think that they're different in that inclusionary zoning right now is a power that the municipality has to obtain from the province. Right now, the only areas that will be permitted to have inclusionary zoning will be around what's called major transit station areas, MTSAs, and those right now, policy staff and city planning are working on the requirements that the province has laid out in order to create boundaries, delineate them, and look at the jobs, employment, population. So just in terms of density, and whether they conform with growth plan target numbers for all of those.
This is sick.
And so, what that really means is this a mature market? And can the real estate market absorb the requirement to put in a certain percentage of affordable housing? So the idea is that, is there enough development interest and enough development happening and enough, profits being made, that the ask of a certain percentage of affordable housing is not going to deter any developer from building there. And so some areas are considered mature and others are not. And there's definitely a question on, in areas that are not considered mature, is that really the best way to analyze whether areas need inclusionary zoning or not? Inclusionary zoning allows is basically a policy that requires non-market housing within market housing, or, it doesn't have to be incorporated, but on this lot, if you build this much, you have to provide this much affordable housing. And affordable housing has, technical definitions and has to do with the amount of rent people pay and average. And I am not the person to answer that question. But just so people know that affordable is a definition, and it has a very specific, bar in terms of what rent people pay.
Right.
And so that, in essence, that's what it is. And I think I wrote to you that I think inclusionary zoning is one of the main tools that we need in order to help, mitigate or deal with gentrification. Because if the more affordable units you have, the more diversity you have in a population that's able to buy into an area and live there.
In our email exchange, you mentioned wishing you had more tools to address the impacts of gentrification. What are some of those tools?
I mean, I think that if we had if we had the ability to apply inclusionary zoning policies in more areas, that would be helpful. Definitely, putting density around transit does make a lot of sense. But there are cities that don't actually do that. They spread their density. You can think of London or Paris. You don't have huge tall towers around all of their subway stations, right? And so Toronto, we are going to be going into that a scenario that has not necessarily been done in other cities in this way. But I would say the other tool is not really on the city side per se. I think you look at in the past the subsidy given to creation of co-op housing and other type of forms of housing. Also land trusts. Parkdale has a land trust now, and helping citizens form as a collective to purchase land as a collective to provide housing for people in their community. And I think that's something that could be subsidized. The city could, have policies that make it easier for those type of developments to obtain approvals. And that would make all the difference. If you look at a neighborhood like St. Lawrence Market, which I used to be the planner for a few years, the co-op housing in that neighborhood is extremely successful. Lots of families in that area, and it's a vibrant, diverse community, and not too tall of buildings. And you can really see how co-op housing and other forms of that, different forms of ownership could be beneficial in the city.
In the past year, there has been an increase, at least from my limited perspective, of grassroots political activism in the city. What has that looked like from your perspective, and do you think it's having any effect on how decisions are made?
Well, it's an interesting question, and really, as a development planner or community planner, we're not to compare ourselves, of course, with the actual frontline staff that in hospitals and emergency, but we are on the ground staff. And so we hear the hurt first. And having, worked for the city, oh my goodness, over 12, 13 years, what is being said at community meetings has changed. Before, people did not want affordable housing in their neighborhoods. Now everyone does. People were not scared of being thrown out of their homes as renters, tenants. And now they are completely. And the tone has really changed. There's a lot of fear. And so I think that, planners, we feel this, and we know this as a collective, especially community planners. And I would say the change that's happening is, internal a bit. The demographics inside the division are changing. People, starting my age are starting to get into more leadership positions. And with that comes, the lens of this generation and not I think in the past, politically and internally, there was a lot of protection for the detached homes, the neighborhoods, the yellow belt that they call it. And it is because of, I think there's a realization that neighborhoods is what makes Toronto. The uniqueness of all the neighborhoods is essentially a Toronto defining element. That said, we have, I think it's something like 30,000 people or 50,000 people, every however many months or year coming to the city, and people need a place to live. And so we cannot block off huge swaths of our city that cannot be developed in any kind of more intense way than a detached house.
Right.
And so there's acknowledgement there. And our chief planner, his key priority this year and moving forward is a project called expanding housing options in neighborhoods. And so that is, a division-wide initiative commencing now, examining more intensification in this yellow belt in neighborhoods. Now, some of it'll be, is along with laneway suites will be like secondary suites, granny suites, allowing those, not just if you have a lane, but allowing someone to build something in their backyard. More flexibility around multiplexes. So, in the past you'd have duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. Those aren't being built anymore. And so we're looking at why that is and how to permit more of those. And then looking at the major streets. So those streets that there's lots of traffic on them, they seem like those core main streets, but there's detached or semi-detached houses all along them.
Right.
There are transit corridors, bus lines, and it makes no sense. And so those are kind of the first look at where does it make sense? Where is it more reasonable? Where's the least impact where you could put a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8-story building,
right,
that currently, has a semi-detached house. And so I think that is the type of intensification and quote unquote gentle density that there's a call for now. And, planning's heard it loud and clear. We've known for many years, but it's something that is hard to move politically. A lot of the owners of these detached houses are voters, and they vote, they get out and vote.
Yeah.
Not in people that are looking for more housing options are not always the people that vote, but people that own houses generally vote. And so they have been able to wield influence on politicians to protect their interests, as all citizens have the right to do. But that has resulted in some planning policies that protect those areas over other city building objectives. And I think that now we're looking at that and seeing where we can have the least impact or the most impact in terms of intensification with the least impact on people that do have bought somewhere with an expectation of more of a low scale built form kind of living, and how to balance those. And that is going to be a tricky exercise.
Yeah.
But it's interesting the way they've organized it in the division, and that it's really going to be a project done by different planners in different districts, understanding the different scenarios, the differences in the districts, with varying experience. So it's going to be a really robust, thorough study that I think will actually produce a lot more housing and affordable housing in the city.
I'm so glad that we have someone like you, and assumably people similar to you, looking into this sort of thing. We have exchanged over 21 emails, and our 10-minute conversation has gone for about 50 minutes. So I won't take any more of your time. But Sipo, thank you so much for giving me this time, because it's really It's really neat to talk to somebody in the inner workings and get a sense of what's happening and a sense that all the work is not being done out here out in the rest of the world, that there's a lot of really good work being done in City Hall itself. It's just a great opportunity to get to talk to you and find out about everything that you do.
Well, thanks so much. And, you know, I think it's great that planners should do these kind of, you know, chats more often. And I think that, yes, you know, you said it earlier, government can move slow and it is hard to follow. I follow the city because I work for the city, but, you know, what happens provincially, what happens federally, I follow the news, but I don't follow bills and legislation as closely as I should. And it's difficult for people with our busy lives, and especially with, you know, everything that's happening in the world right now, not just Canada. And so I think I would just say to people that to get involved as much as they can. Sometimes there is engagement fatigue or consultation fatigue, but even a quick email to you know, a city employee about, you know, the road work happening, the development happening, you know, a new school, something like right into your politician and right into, you know, city planning, but city staff, because you have more influence than you think.